I'm excited to be here today and very excited to have this conversation. To start out with, I'll be the moderator today. My name is Shivani Saroya. I am the CEO and founder of Tala. So I'm an entrepreneur myself, and so this topic is extremely important to me. Our company, Tala, is working specifically to open up financial access to the financial solutions that will help the underserved actually improve their quality of life and hopefully actually help our economic sectors continue to flourish. To start out with, we'll be talking about the demographic dividend and how the demographic dividend presents a potential strategic opportunity for nations. But the levers of demographic dividends require sustained investments in people and human capital if they are to be successful and long-standing across generations. So in today's conversation, we'll hear from 2 different panels with 8 distinguished panelists in this field, diving deeper into the levers that will allow us to build a holistic picture of the challenges we must address in the journey towards developing a global generation of empowered populations. So to start out with, I'd like to invite Professor Parfait Andalou Inyage to share his perspective on the demographic dividend.
To bring this a little higher. All right, so from the top. Bring it to the top. Well, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to attend this session on demographic diversity and dividend. Because we are in Kenya, I would like to open my presentation with 3 words in Swahili, or at least I think there are 3 words in Swahili. If we can just have the slide back to the top. All right. Okay. Is it good? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's start with our 3 Swahili words. The first, obviously, is a word that everybody knows, which is I'd like to take the opportunity to send every delegate a warm welcome to this conference generally, and to this session in particular. Then I'd try my hand at another word that I didn't know before, but that essentially means happy anniversary. I would like to wish the ICPD a happier 25th anniversary. And we're hoping for many more. The 25th anniversary is a very special one, and we look forward to the very next, and we hope to celebrate it with equal pomp. The third word in Swahili is one that I like to say, but I cannot really say it. Hakuna Matata means don't worry. I can't say it because, in fact, we do have to worry. We have to worry because we're coming to this conference at a time of significant trouble. We're coming at this conference at a time when the world has to face a number of issues that need urgent resolution. And so, in a sense, this conference is about debating together how we can all work and make the world a better place. And if you are a UN person, this means essentially how we can work to achieve sustainable development. So the substance of this panel, as well as the substance of my presentation, is going to be to argue that we can use the dividend, we can use what I call the generation dividend as a powerful mechanism to lift the world and to achieve all our sustainable development goals. So that is about the substance. In terms of the style, I tried to borrow from African tradition, and I'm going to organize my presentation in the form of a short story, okay? And it's a short story that involves 3 historic figures from different parts of the world. The first of this figure is volume? Okay. The first of this figure is a British person from the 19th century. And the role of that person in the story is going to be, as you expect from a British person, to tell us how big a mess we have in our hands and how hard we need to work to make the world a better place. The second person in the story is a Greek from ancient Greece, and their role in the story is going to be about basically providing a means for us to achieve sustainable development. If I can just try this to work, move forward. Okay, and so the Greek is going to try to get us to move forward, provide the means by which we can achieve sustainable development. And the third person in the story is going to be a Kenyan, and a Kenyan that is going to supply the motivation for us to move forward. And so I'll just start with the Brit. And the Brit in question is the Brit who is in the 19th century said, we live in the best of time and we live in the worst of time. We live in a time of wisdom, but also in a time of foolishness. This Brit, as you know, is Charles Dickens. And he was talking about 19th century Europe, but it might as well be talking about the world today. Because as we look at the world today, we are actually facing a mixed world. We have a world where on the one hand, you can see that we're making tremendous progress in technology, as well as in building human capital. Over the last quarter century, for instance, we have expanded secondary enrollment by 25%, roughly. We have reduced global under 5 mortality by nearly 50%, and we have increased life expectancy by a full 7 years. So there's been tremendous progress on those grounds. On the other hand, we are also at a time when we are less and less reluctant to share our wealth, where we have rising inequality across the world. We live in a time when we're not very good stewards of our environment. And these 2 failures can actually come back to haunt us and to bring us on the brink of despair. And so, according to a prominent historian, for instance, the rising inequality or the levels of inequality that we have now across the world can actually bring many countries to the brink of revolutions, to the brink of social unrest, war, and chaos. Likewise, our failure to protect the environment is leading many species on the brink of extinction, and it compromises our own survival. So something needs to be done, and it needs to be done urgently. We need to lift the world today, and we need to lift it together. And so the question that we are trying to confront is, how are we going to go about lifting the world? And that's where, in the story, comes the second person. And this is the Greek. And the Greek is going to provide the solution. Many of you may know Archimedes, who suggested that in order to lift the world, all we needed was simply a lever that was long enough and strong enough, and we needed an anchor point, a place where we can fix our lever, and if we had the 2, we could lift the world. And so this was Archimedes' theory. But the question is, can we apply this theory to the world that we have today? Can we use this principle to solve the problems that we have today in terms of our global development? And that's where our third person in the story, the Kenyan, or at least the Kenyans, come in. And this is where the Kenyans are going to tell us that we can. We can lift the world if, as Jomo Kenyatta said to the Kenyan, we're not afraid to face Mount Kilimanjaro, that we are ready to take on the steepest hills. We can lift the world if we pull together Harambee style. We can lift the world as one son of this land eventually told the world, yes, we can. We can lift the world under 3 conditions. The first condition for us to be able to lift the world is to use the ICPD as a foundation. The ICPD as a foundation on human rights can provide a solid anchor on which to achieve sustainable development and reach most of our development goals. The second condition is to rely on the demographic dividend as a potential lever that we can press in our efforts to achieve sustainable development. And the third condition is to rely on what I call the generation dividend to help in this effort. And so these are my 3 words, these are my 3 points, these are the 3 conditions that we need to lift the world, and I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation discussing each of these conditions very briefly. Let's start with the generation dividend. What is the generation dividend? Essentially, the generation dividend is the modern Archimedes, is the generation of young people in the world who were born after the Cairo Conference, so roughly between 1995 and 2010. Okay. This generation is special in many regards. At 2 billion, first of all, is special from a demographic standpoint. At 2 billion, roughly, it's the largest generation in history in terms of just sheer size. It is also special from the standpoint of technology. This is a generation that is very technologically savvy, and that's why it's sometimes called the I generation, in other words, internet generation, or the Android generation. It's also interesting culturally or ideologically because it's a generation that has unique struggles combining both its attempt to secure its right, but also its attempt to embrace its responsibility. And so the point that I'm going to make here is that this large generation, this generation dividend can be a very special generation. It can be not just large, but it can be a great generation that is going to carry our effort to lift the world and to achieve sustainable development. So the task that we have before all of us is to nurture this generation so that it can lift all of us and so that it can lift the world. And so what we need to do is to help this generation combine its effort to secure its rights, but also embrace its responsibility vis-a-vis the world. Okay. Now that we have identified the generation dividend, the second piece of the puzzle is the dividend, or the lever. And what is the lever in this particular case is the notion of the demographic dividend that you've all heard about, which is essentially the boost that demographic change can provide to our efforts to achieve socioeconomic development. And so Archimedes wanted a lever that was long and strong enough. What I'm going to say is that demographic dividend as a lever are not just long, but they're also large and they're broad. And I'm going to just show you a few slides to demonstrate how long and broad they are. Okay. First of all, they are large in terms of their, next, if you can push there. I'm just going to say next. 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 They are large in terms of the economic benefits that they can provide. The slide that you have on your left basically is an example that all of you know, the sort of spectacular economic rise of South Korea in the years between 1970 and 2000. This is a time when this country multiplied by its GDP per capita by a factor of 10. And according to experts, demographic dividends were responsible for between 1/3 and 1/4 of that growth. What this means is that many countries, many low-income countries today, can make a similar quantum jump in their efforts to achieve their demographic dividend. So it's a potentially large in economic terms as a lever. The second point is that the lever is also broad. It's not just large, it's broad. It's not just about economics, but it also can achieve benefits in other sectors of life, including health, including education, including inequality, including political security. So with any effort to harness the demographic dividend, we can achieve not just growth, but also many other socioeconomic benefits. Now, dividend as a lever are also long. Next. And so by long, I mean they can unfold not just in a very short period of time, but they can be made to last longer, to unfold in multiple waves that cover multiple generations, and that corresponds to the efforts of different people in the age structure. The first dividend, which was first recognized, comes from investment in the young adult population. By providing them employment, they can save and invest, and that is the first boost to economic growth. But as this generation ages, go back. As this generation ages, then you have the aging population, if it's economically secure, that can make additional contribution to growth. And then there's a third dividend that can arise from the investment that the first generation made into the education and the human capital of the coming generation. And as this generation moves forward, you can have additional gains in terms of productivity. In the next conversation, you may hear a discussion about a fourth dividend, which is about a dividend that is associated with women entering the labor market. So we've talked about the Archimedes, which is the generation dividend. We've talked about the lever, and now we are going to finish with the foundation, the foundation, the fulcrum, okay? And here, what I'm going to argue is that the ICPD and its focus on human rights as a foundation for development can be a solid foundation on which we base our efforts to achieve sustainable development. Next. So very operationally, the UNFPA has tried to organize or focus attention on 3 areas of social investment that include employment, education, and empowerment. The investment in education are designed to facilitate the participation of the generation dividend in economic life. The education is supposed to impart not just job skills, but also human and social skills that make it possible for this generation to lead fuller lives. And then the empowerment is going to be a mechanism by which we make it possible for this generation to secure its rights, but also to contribute to the world. So in leaving, let me just conclude and repeat what I tried to argue. What I tried to argue is that today we face, last slide. We face a world that is making progress, but also a world that is on the brink, a world that we need to lift. Lifting the world is a tough task. Achieving all the sustainable development goals is a tough task, and the road is going to be long and it's going to be arduous. But is that a road that we can travel? The answer is yes, we can. We can travel this road if we work together. And I hope to leave everybody in this conference. I hope everybody's going to leave this conference after this week feeling energized that the ICPD can serve as a strong foundation upon which we can build our development effort, that the demographic dividend can be a powerful mechanism for which to with which to lift the world, that the dividend is not a magic bullet, nor is it a backdoor to anything else, but it's really an opportunity for many countries in the world to achieve a quantum leap. And with this, I thank you.
Thank you, Parfait. I'd like to now invite our 2 other panelists up on the stage. I'd like to welcome Dr. Maria Flexbart, the Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development from Germany. Welcome. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sonalde Desai, the Professor of Sociology at the University of Maryland and Professor at the National Council of Applied Economics Research in New Delhi. I'd like to invite each of you to share your perspectives on the role and needs of women and youth to achieve sustainable growth. Dr. Flexberg, I'd like to start with you.
Yes, thank you very much. We just heard in this very entertaining and informative short story of Professor Lundu Yenge how closely demographic trends and sustainable development are interrelated. So the demographic dividend does not come about by chance. We need to equip these agents of progress, these agents of change with the necessary skill sets and opportunity. And these agents are our young people. And they can only grow into productive members of society if they have their rights to health, to education, and to decent employment, if these rights are realized. So in addressing those needs, we must have the realization of human rights and the achievement of gender equality at the center of all our efforts, and this is for what the ICPD stands and how it continues to guide us. It's dramatically that girls especially continue to be marginalized and face structural barriers that exclude them from social and economic life. According to the World Bank, global economic growth could be increased by 14% if women had equal opportunities to participate in labor market like men do, and so it's our duty to enable her to mobilize their potential. Health is in this context a prerequisite for sustainable development as well as a result of it. It is also for fundamental that these rights have to be realized. We believe that universal health coverage can guide these efforts and that strengthening health system is the way to achieve UHC, including services for sexual and reproductive health. Full stop.
Thank you. Dr. Desai, I'd love for you to share your perspective.
Well, Parfait spoke very persuasively about demographic levers. I'd like to tell you that these levers will be much shorter, narrower, smaller if we don't include women and address the challenge of gender equality. Demographic dividend that does not include gender dividend will only be a glass that's a quarter full, not even a half full glass. Let me take the 3 stages of demographic dividend that Parfait talked about. First, he talked about expansion of working pool. Okay. Second, he talked about investing in young workers and increasing their skills. And third was the benefit from having senior citizens who are happy, healthy, and productive. Okay. Each of this stage, okay, each of this potential would not be realized unless we include women fully into it. Mao Zedong said that women hold up half of the sky. I think that they would not be able to hold up half of the sky unless they are fully empowered to do so. Let me expand on each of these. Okay? The first aspect of demographic dividend that Parfait spoke about is increasing number of workers. Now, with declining fertility, we would expect that women have fewer childcare responsibilities and more of them should be in the labor force. And yes, we do see it actually in Latin America and Caribbean, but in the rest of the world, the results are very, very mixed. For example, there is a marginal increase in Africa and MENA region, and the 2 most populous nations of the world, India and China, actually have seen a declining labor force participation rate for women. For China, partially because there has been a dismantling of the state-supported childcare system, increasing the burden on mothers. For India, because there has been an overcrowding in agriculture that has led to exit out of agriculture. Men can find job as welders, truck drivers, postal carriers. Women often find it very difficult to find some of these jobs, resulting in the decline in their labor force participation. Second aspect of demographic dividend that we are interested in is increasing the number of better educated, skilled, and prepared workforce. Here again, we have a mixed gender report card. Women's education has increased sharply, and yes, it's a very good thing. We have more educated, more skilled women workers at least as a potential. But at the same time, their family burdens have not decreased. Early adulthood, early 20s, is the time when we expect individuals to gain vocational skills, develop attachment to the workforce, gain self-confidence. This is a time when actually women also bear the burden of early motherhood. You know, fertility has declined, and we think that age at first birth would have gone up, but that has hardly budged. For Kenya, TFR fell from 6.7 to 3.7, and yet the mean age at first birth barely went up from 20 to 21 years. So unless we can think about creating a situation in which women can enjoy early adulthood to develop an attachment to the workforce, it's going to be very hard for them to carry it on once they have children and family responsibilities. The third part of demographic dividend actually is where we have paid almost no attention to gender. We think about an aging population as a population which is increasing its healthy lifespan and should be able to live happy, healthy, productive lives. Okay? But we don't recognize that most of the older population is actually female. Sex ratio among the elderly population is very much skewed towards women. For individuals 65 and above, globally, there are 80 men to 100 women. Okay? And interestingly, these are the women who have been actually left out of economic growth process over time, where they have worked in informal sector jobs and hence don't have social security benefits, where they have not accumulated assets. There are some fairly interesting statistics. In Ghana, 70% of the land parcels are owned by men. In India, home ownership, men have 3 times as higher rate of home ownership as women do. If women have not accumulated social security benefits, if they have not accumulated savings and they have not accumulated wealth, it's very hard to imagine that they can live the kind of happy, healthy, productive lives as senior citizens that we would like to see them live. So we come here today. We come here today to celebrate the unique consensus that was forged in Cairo, where nations of the world decided that we will focus on individuals at the center of the development. I hope that today, as we come here to celebrate it, we also come here to renew our determination to ensure that the discourse of development, population, gender dividend, demographic dividend all includes women. And unless we really can include a gender dividend into demographic dividend, we really are going to end up with a glass that is only a quarter as full. Thank you.
Parfait, is there anything additional that you'd like to add?
Except to fully agree.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for sharing your perspectives. One of the things that I hear is among all of your work, there's a resounding theme that interdependence is key to economic growth. And with it is how we think about resourcing this growth and ensuring the protection of populations. So I have a couple questions that I'd like us to consider as we think about these perspectives. So my first question is for Dr. Flexbart. I'd like to understand better how Germany's cooperation is advancing the development of the dividend, of the demographic dividend.
Yes, I think we have to consider demographic changes across all the sectors. Therefore, in our cooperation, we invest in several key sectors for social development, as there are education, health, and employment, and also social protection. I think this is really very, very crucial. Let me give a few concrete examples. Let me go to Malawi with you. Although the contraceptive use has been increased in the past decade, 52% of unmarried 50 to 90-year-old girls have an unmet need for family planning services, especially in rural areas. So we are supporting mobile health providers in areas not serviced by the existing health facilities, and our project also trains public health workers using radio as well, social media, for example, and use clubs just to engage with young people. And we involve relevant stakeholders such as traditional leaders, such as religious communities, parents and teachers to reach the young people and to create more acceptance for our project and for access to family planning. Let me go with you to rural Guinea. There we are supporting a project that is working towards keeping girls in school and that provides training for female teachers. So far, we have reached 850 female teachers and 15,000 girls who have had the chance to stay at school. And we have reconfigured the physical environment in schools. We provide now separate toilets for girls and boys as a very, very important condition for them staying in schools. And last not least, in Nigeria, we work together with a local NGO, with Animus Suturas, and this organization mainly works with young people, especially in primary and secondary schools, and it provides information on family planning, reproductive health, and thus promotes, among things, the self-determination of young girls in Nigeria. And the aim is of the project to reduce unplanned pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases, and I think we are on a good way with this project. Thank you.
Professor Desai, your work has proven that the needs of individuals can vary. What can we learn from the geographic diversity and distribution of opportunity and its impact on the demographic dividend?
You know, one of the good things about coming together at this stage in the development of the world is that we have countries which have been at different spectrums of demographic dividend. In fact, that's what we'll hear about in the second panel after this one. It's wonderful that we can learn from different countries at different experiences, both where they have had successes and where they have had failures. Okay. For example, for those of us in South Asia, East Asia is the miracle area for both economic growth and demographic dividend. And yet, we actually begin to realize that one of the challenges that women in East Asia face is this intense focus on child rearing and teaching children, where sort of responsibilities have increasingly devolved onto families, which actually stops women from participating in the labor force. Okay? So I think that we have a lot of learning that can occur cross-nationally, which would be really a worthwhile thing for sort of meetings like this, where we can do so. Thank you.
In our final closing, another theme that I hear that I'd love just maybe each of you to touch on is the relationship of trust, hope, and risk between governments, institutions, and citizens. Parfait, from your presentation, you showed us that there's a delicate balance that must come together in order for an individual to maximize their potential. Professor Desai, you've explored that intricate paradox of strengthening the economy, growing population, but minimal workforce development. I'd love for both of you to talk about the perspective of trust and how can we repair that trust when currently it is broken within our society.
That's a very fundamental question. I think trust in general has now been recognized as a key ingredient for governance more broadly, and it's actually defined as a form of capital, which we call social capital. But trust is even more important for achieving SDGs and harnessing a dividend. And there are different, at least in my view, four different conversations or four different lines that we need to address. The first is the conversation or trust between sort of, I'd say, generation, between the present and the future. We have to be accountable for future generation and what we leave them in terms of the world we leave them. And so that's one line of trust and accountability that we need to consider. A second line is precisely what Dr. Desai talked about, which is the conversation between men and women, a conversation across gender line, which is also critical to the harnessing of dividend and to governance. But there are two other lines that I'd like to expand on a little bit. One is the trust and conversation across class lines. One theme that I talked about is the growing inequality and just massive differences between the haves and the have-nots. Unfortunately, a lot of the top 10, most of the top 10 countries in the world in terms of inequality are in Latin America and in Africa. And the gaps are just enormous. And unless you can repair this trust, it's very difficult to have a society. And increasingly, we have to realize that it's not just the poor who pay the price for this inequality. Society in general pays the price in terms of reduced growth, but also in terms of just sheer security. And so we need to build that trust between classes if we want to move ahead. And the final trust fault line that I like to address is between ages, okay, between those who govern and those who are governed. I talked about the generation dividend, which is the generation of youth. In Europe, the gap in age between the governed and those who govern is about 12 years on average. In Africa, that gap is 45 years between the median age of those in governing and the youth population. So it's a big gulf there that we need to somehow bridge. And it's a difficult gap to bridge because there are differences just in terms of the world in which today's generation is being raised, but it's a gap that we need to address urgently. And so in addition to all of the conversation that we need to have across classes, there has to be a really deliberate effort to understand this new generation, its aspiration, but also what it can do, and to make certain that we give that generation the tools to lift the world.
Thank you.
Those are great comments, Parfait. And I think I would add to a few other dimensions of trust in here. Okay? I think that trust between the citizens and the government goes both ways. The government has to trust the citizens that they will make good choices rather than mandating those choices. Okay? Do we really need to define, how many children individuals should have, or should we think about, create the right circumstances in which individuals will choose what is right for them? Okay? So that's one aspect of the trust. The other aspect of the trust is that for the citizens, when they are using government services, to have a trust that the services would be available and that services would be of reasonable quality. We can always say that we want to encourage more hospital deliveries, but if the pregnant woman, when she gets to a hospital, there is no doctor available, or the hospital is so overcrowded that she has to lie on floor, okay, that breaks the trust. Okay? I would also say, though, one other area of trust that's very important, which is between the development sector and the development funders. Governments, funding agencies, and a variety of other sources from which funding is given, and the development actors. The idea that you can do a project in 3 years, show a results, okay, and then you are out, okay, doesn't really function well. If we are going to set up programs, we have to have a longer term horizon. We have to have a trust that these programs will function. My older sister got trained out of this particular program, and yes, I can also expect to get the training. Okay? That means that the program is not going to end in just 3 years. Okay? So I think this whole idea of trust, commitments, and investing for a long term is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you all for sharing your insights. I'd like you to step down, and then we'll invite you back for panel 2. Thank you very much. right. Well, I'm particularly excited for this second panel. We just, got to hear from some great panelists really talking about the theories and their perspectives on the demographic dividend. Now I'm excited to talk about putting this into practice, specifically in terms of policies and programs that all of you are actually putting in within your countries to enable the successful enablement of the demographic dividend. So to start out with, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So I'd like to, we're in opposite order, but going from right to left over here, Mr. Mohammed Manan, the Prime Minister of Planning from Bangladesh. We have Dr. Gina, Professor of Economic Planning and Development from the Kingdom of Eswatini, and Ambassador Gorgi Panatov, the Bulgarian ambassador to the United Nations, and Dr. Haruko Hayashi, the Director of Research and International Cooperation for the National Institute of Population and Social Security Research from Japan. So to start out with, I'd love to hear from each of you your perspectives, and if you can tell us a little bit about what's happening in your different countries. Mr. Mohammed, we'll like to start with you. Yes.
The difference is I am not a demographer or a scientist or a professor. I'm a political man. Having said that, I must also point out one thing. The gentleman who gave the presentation a few minutes earlier on this, leverage and mess, this sort of things, it was very elegant. For non-cognoscenti like us, it made things clear. But I have some questions to him. Can I ask those questions now?
You may.
The pie chart showed economics twice rather than once. I would like to know why was that emphasis given to economics 2 times. And the pie chart also mentioned about political insecurity. Why not stability? The word insecurity, because we are in politics. It is fraught with a lot of confusion, misconceptions, these sort of things, to you. So these 2 things I need to, maybe I'll go over to him and learn from him. Okay, this thing, demographic dividend, it is there. Whether I know or not, whether I make a study, it is there. But being in politics, in the planning game and in policy matters, once you know that it is there from you, from him, it is good to know how it is shaping up, what the implications are, so that with their assistance, the policies can be framed, which will increase value, which will strengthen the winds of change, which the demographic dividend brings. Coming to my country, Bangladesh, it's obvious the last few decades, there have been tremendous change. And many people, apart from other factors which have played its part, ascribe to this demographic dividend being one of the drivers of the new growth change that is happening in Bangladesh. Now, once you know that the demographic dividend is there, it's not the only thing, but it's a major thing. Now, to strengthen this, we have been told by pundits that we need to raise the level of skill of the population. We have to raise the level of education. We have to raise the system of social security that exists in a country like ours, which is low income, so that the synergy that results from all this planning, all these policy changes, will add more wind to this storm of demographic dividend. In Bangladesh, it's clear that we are reaping benefits now, because it is for the first time in the last so many years there has been change in our society in terms of economic development. We are consistently scoring above 7-8% growth. Literacy, electrification, building infrastructure, in every aspect of this game of change, there has been sea change. And definitely demographic dividend has played a part. So he gave the example of Korea from 70 to 2000, 1/3 to 1/4 may be ascribed directly to demographic dividend. I wish similar arithmetic could be done for our case also, because our population is different from the Korean population. The level of education, skill, existing at that moment is quite different. So we would like to know more from UNFPA and other technical organizations who work in this field, where we stand in terms of human resource development, so that our demographic dividend can yield more benefits, become more productive, to be using the term. So what at this stage I would like to say that yes, this is going on. Yes, you have told us, and our pundits and our scholars have also told us that this is happening. So this is the time to put our acts together, reap benefits from you, from UNFPA and other friends from all over the world, our development partners, and make things happen faster than it is happening now. I think I should stop at this stage. Thank you.
Before I say a few things about this demographic dividend issue, let me just say the Kingdom of Eswatini is a small country, lower middle income, but this middle income thing is misleading. It has all the characteristics of poverty that you normally see in the least developed countries. In terms of our population structure, by 76, for instance, we had almost 60% of dependency. We are characterized by a situation where fewer people are working and the majority of the people are not productive, either because they are too young to work, they are still at school or somewhere, or they are simply not productive enough. And the population of people who are going to work now is increasing. However, still we have a high dependency ratio in the kingdom. A frightening statistic that we need to work on, I'll give an example, not an example, is 47%. An adult, somebody turning 18, joining the labor force in the kingdom of Eswatini, will have a productivity of 47% compared to an adult in the advanced countries. Now, in this demographic dividend thing, we're just at the beginning, we're talking about it, we're formulating, we can't say we're beginning to see things, but evidence is there that the population just above age 15, we're beginning to have that part of the demographic growing. So we will be having more people of a working age joining the labor force. And for these people to be productive, to lead to what is called demographic dividends, there are a number of things that must be done. The professor indicated them, of course. One of those is the health. In order for the people to be healthy and be productive, they must be healthy. And we are addressing the issue from early childhood to much later, all aspects of health services. And the health sector is receiving the second highest proportion of the budget following education. I won't have time to enumerate all those things, but health is being addressed, and we also have the need to strengthen institutions that will help protect people. In terms of economic reforms and job creation, we also have youth funds that are being introduced. All the things that you see that the professor gave are necessary, but not sufficient. A sufficient thing is to empower the people so they can do things themselves. Then you'll be moving towards realizing the demographic dividend. I thank you.
Ambassador Panatal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. As His Excellency the Minister from Bangladesh said, he was not an expert, he's a politician. I'm neither an expert nor a politician. I'm an ambassador, and sometimes the ambassadors should be competent on everything. But allow me to share with you some observations I have regarding the situation in Bulgaria. First, let me start by saying that we are facing very dynamic times today. We are facing, I would say, tectonic shifts in traditional perceptions, in value systems, and shifts in life expectations. And unavoidably and unsurprisingly, those shifts have an immediate effect on the reproductive and migratory attitudes of people. So this happens in Bulgaria. Bulgaria is a country in Eastern Europe, and in Eastern Europe, the whole region is marked by low fertility, population aging, and complex migration movements. The demographic situation in Bulgaria marks a serious risk, but I will go further. According to official UN data, we are experiencing, excuse me, the worst situation in the world. The population of Bulgaria is the fastest shrinking population globally. Why? During the most difficult times of the economic transition in the 90s, more than 1 million people left our country because of the economic and financial crisis. Emigration, low birth rates, and high death rate are all contributing factors for the declining population. Actually, our growth rate is negative, minus 0.67. At the same time, I would like to stress that, at the same time, Bulgaria has a high Human Development Index. My country ranks 51st in the world. And my country, Bulgaria, holds the 38th position in Newsweek's ranking of the world's best countries to live in. That rankings measure health, education, political environment, and economic dynamism. At the same time, Bulgarian HIV rate is also among the lowest in the world. Nevertheless, we are the fastest shrinking nation globally. So, of course, that dynamic poses a challenge for the economy, for the pension funds, and the insurance companies. But we're convinced that raising the retirement age and investing in health, especially reproductive health, education, youth policies, sports for all, and promotion of healthy lifestyle are the way to go. As a society, we should take measures to empower women in government and business, reduce the conflict between the professional career and child care of women, and achieve gender equality and invest in reproductive health and services. I can share with you experience of my own. I am a civil servant. I work at the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I participated in a group at the ministry to consider a promotion of our colleagues. So the promotion is linked to the professional experience, to the length of the professional experience. And they started a debate at the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs whether the years where the mom takes care of her child are counted as a professional experience or not. And I found myself fighting my colleagues, convincing them that this is professional experience. So, yeah, we won that one. We won that one. But why? Studies show that societies with efficient gender equality and empowerment of women are the most prosperous and sustainable. What measures are we taking? This year, 2 important decisions were taken by the Bulgarian government: to double the expenditure for education, including teachers' salaries, and to cover in full the expenditure for all requests for in vitro insemination and for all related reproductive health services. I would like, thank you. I'd like to stress that we are focused already on the young people, on their empowerment. And here, I would like to appreciate our long-standing cooperation with the United Nations Populations Fund and particularly with the regional office in Istanbul in the elaboration of our demographic strategy and policies towards young people. Here in the hall, by the way, we have a representative of the Institute, International Institute for Youth Development, Petri Sofia. That is an institution created with the help of UNFPA in Bulgaria. That is a knowledge hub and regional resource center that supports youth empowerment in the areas of sexual and reproductive health and rights, gender equality and peace building in the region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia and beyond. So we created together with UNFPA and with the regional center in Istanbul, we created a regional hub dedicated to those purposes. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now it's my turn. I'm so surprised to see so many people here, and then many of the people might be interested with this demographic dividend. And I'm from Japan, where it is very aged, most aged in the world. Actually, the proportion of aged people more than 65 years old, it is 28%. And then also, every year, our population is declining. Maybe the speed in Bulgaria, it is quicker, but the number of people declining, it's like 400,000 people are declining every year, so it is a lot. However, today, I'm supposed to talk about our demographic dividend, so I'm going to talk about a bit of history. Because Professor Parfait, you have shown South Korea. Yes, that's true, that South Korea and then also the Asian dragons, they were having this demographic dividend in the 1980s and 1990s. That is the time when this word demographic dividend has been created, showing that there is the lower children and then still the aged population is not too many. Then there is a big portion of working age population that will be creating a good condition for the economic development. So we had that good time. That was about 1960s. And then during the 1960s, we had this demographic dividend, but even we didn't have this term. We didn't know that it is demographic dividend. But we know that there are less and less children, and still the aging issue has not become a serious issue. And then we know that there is a lot of working age population. So what did we do? So first, we have achieved the universal health coverage in 1961. Why we could do it? Because there are less children, and then there is not many elderly people who need a lot of health care. Then there is a young working age people who is not having too many diseases. So people pay for the health insurance, and then you can have a good coverage of healthcare for everybody during the time. And then that was one of the reasons why we could have this universal health coverage during this 1961, during the demographic dividend time. The second thing is the pension. The same reason, there are many working age populations, so they just pay out of salary the pension premium. And then you pay to the public pension fund, and pension fund have a lot of money, so this collected money is redistributed, financed to make the sewages, to make the roads, and to make the bridges, and then that has contributed for the development of Japan. And then the last thing is that employment. Because there is a lot of people who need employment, but during the time, the unemployment of Japan was the lowest in the history. It was about less than 1%. And then why? Because there are many things. There are many policies on labor, and also there is, for example, there is the disparity between urban area and rural area. In rural area, there is a lot of young people who are not having enough job. And then in urban area, then there is a lot of demand for the laborers, for the people who wants to work. So at the time, the government started to do this long distance job relocation, job placement policy. And then there is huge, there is a lot of trains packed with young students aged 15 years old, and then bringing these people from northern part of Japan to Tokyo. And then this is one of the policies we had for during this demographic dividend. So this is the 3 examples we had. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So one of the questions I have is actually for Minister Gina, as well as for Mr. Manan. I'd love to understand specifically any interventions that you have in Eswatini around technology, and how specifically that's empowering the youth and potentially kind of increasing equality there. And then, Mr. Manan, if you could share any perspectives or any planned interventions or innovations that you may have in Bangladesh as well.
What was the question? I didn't pick up well. What was the question about? What did you say? I didn't hear well.
Specifically, any planned innovations in the area of technology or gender equality, and then Mr. Gina, if you can also share around technology investment.
First, I can combine, at the beginning of the answer, a short one, I'll combine the technology and empowerment of women. The youngest minister is a woman and is a minister for ICT. That's where I start. And also, we have the Minister for Justice, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Education, Health, I forget another one, it's women. We have been we're traditional, a very traditional society, but we're moving faster than most in empowering women. We're becoming very conscious of the fact that transitioning from secondary school to high school, girls drop out a lot. We're putting every effort to address those issues.
Technology as such, yes, of course, we are at a level which is, say, in 1970, where Korea was. Probably, I think we are not there at this stage even. But the question for us, I think, is that empowerment of women is very important in our case. Half the population, and being a traditional society where women were not equal participants in everything. So for the dividend, simple arithmetic, if half the workforce don't stay in work or stay behind, you have half the output. So for us, the decision to unleash or unbound or open fields for women as such is very important. Even at the level of technology that we have, because we can't change technology overnight, it takes time. But if we can have policy which empower women, bring them out and they contribute, probably we'll have better benefits than otherwise. So it's very simple. For us, women empowerment. For us, other socially binding factors which need to be unleashed and cleared.
Thank you. So, Dr. Hayashi and Ambassador Panatov, in moving towards societies where your demographics are more advanced in age structure, like both of your countries, maybe somewhat a controversial question is, in looking back, is there anything you would have done differently? And if not, I'm also curious if there's anything that you've heard from your fellow panelists as learnings today, or anything that might change your perspective.
I talk first. So what I have said earlier was the good part. But in terms of gender, for example, during the 1960s, we have this traditional value of family. And then the husband go out and work, and then the wife stay at home. So this kind of traditional family model was gradually changing, but we were not changing our policies. For example, until 1985, if the woman goes to work in the company, then she never have a higher job. She just serving the tea, and then when you become 25 years old, it's a good age to get married, and then you retire, and then you get married. This kind of model was up to 1985, and then after that, gradually it was changing. And then because of this, because our policy was a bit not very gender friendly, maybe because it was a long time ago, but that is the reason why our fertility kept on declining, and then until it hit very low, and it was, we have to wait until 1990 or later when we started to think about we have to do something. We have to do something for the couple. We have to arrange the environment so that the young people can get married, and also if they want, they can have children. So we have long time not thinking too much about gender, which caused our low fertility right now. But again, right now, we are having this demographic, how can I say, we are having population decline, and because we are having fewer and fewer people, now women have to work. Now aged people have to work. So somehow we are trying to use this demographic decline, population decline, to empower our women and empower our elderly. So this can be also a different kind of demographic dividend, maybe third demographic dividend or whatever. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. As I mentioned in my intervention, we think that first raising the retirement age is measure number one. But together with that, first we make sure that our aging population receives additional training. They learn lifelong. And actually, probably the most important measure is that my government decided to invest in high-end technologies, high-end health care technologies, including prevention, in order to make the aging population fit for work as long as we can. And your second question was about what would I have done differently. Well, you know, I'm absolutely convinced that the well-being and the prosperity of the population in each and every country, not only in Bulgaria, depends on the quality of education, on the quality of healthcare, of the quality of the social security, and let's say of the overall security. I've been around. I worked and I visited many countries in the world. And I think that these are the main factors we have to focus in order to find a solution for our problems today. So my answer is I would have focused more on education, I would have focused more on healthcare and on social security.
Thank you.
No, I wasn't going to say much that is useful, but I didn't address the technology. As you are aware, technology is one thing that does not ask for permission. You just wake up and find what you have is no longer relevant. You have to learn something else. We're very much into awareness of that, of the Internet of Things type of world we live in. We're still working on the technology that exists now, at least that in terms of communication, the last mile will complete within 5 to 6 years. Everyone will have access to the Wi-Fi in the country. And we're very close to it. Thank you.
That's amazing. Okay, well, thank you to all of our panelists. I'd also like to now bring up our previous panelists onto the stage. So we'll get started as everyone's coming up. To close out, we'd actually like to hear from all of our session participants about your recommendations and commitments towards the completion of the program of action. So to start out with, we'll start with this side of the room and then we can go over there. Please, Minister Manan, you can start. Oh, no. This is just your closing statements
the
around
last question
commitments
which was coming to me, but stopped there. You see, technology is, of course, important, but there is an appropriate level at every level of the economy. Our economy is at a level which has an appropriate level of technology. You can't impose higher technology here, you lose the strength. So number one, there's appropriateness. Number two, you can't compare Japan with us. Japan has higher ratio of aging population than we have. We still don't have the critical level, which is very large, which is unsupportable. It's increasing in number. So at this stage, it is within our grasp. Our dependency ratio is lower than theirs. So we have a window of opportunity here larger than they have. So these are the factors that we have to keep it in hand and try to use the time that is available to us as quickly or as well as we can by use of various policies, by use of various supportive measures for the government.
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say over the next 20 years, there'll be more changes technologically than the last 100 years. Some of the jobs we have today will no longer exist. So as we think about the youth and preparing them for future, we have to factor that in, that the world will not look like it looks today in the very, very near future.
Well, it's 25 years past Cairo, and I think I agree actually with Natalia Kanem that we don't have more 25 years. What should be done? Everything within our capabilities and capacities in order to achieve the goals. But what Bulgaria concretely will do is our first commitment is actually to provide health care, reproductive health care to all women, no matter have they health insurance or not. This is the first. The second is that we are determined to stop gender-based violence. In the beginning of this year, my government passed, actually the parliament passed a law criminalizing sexual violence in families. So this is a large leap forward, I think. And the third thing I mentioned, we decided to invest in high-end healthcare technologies because our population is aging.
So, since the morning, we hear that maybe a bit different from 25 years ago is that we are now in a world where there is a lot of diversity. The challenges which now African countries are now having is completely opposite to what we are having as a challenge. However, I suppose that I have been living in Africa for many years, but I suppose that our challenge is as difficult as the African challenges. And then this diversity is something which is now characterizing our world. So what we have to think about is in every country there is the challenges, and then in every country there are old people, young people, and then there are men and women, and so we have to think about to empower everybody. So this is my comments.
Thank you. Professor Sinalde, I'd like to start with you, and then we can go down the row.
You know, I started my career working with preparatory documents for the ICPD, for the organization I was working in. And coming back here seems like a great full circle to me. It also seems to me like we have a very different mood today here than it was 25 years ago. At that time, we sort of had hopes, but not a confidence that some of these hopes can be achieved. Okay? Today, I think that our aspirations have grown significantly higher, our impatience has grown significantly higher, and we kind of have this sense that, yes, it can be achieved, but let's do it quickly. Okay? It also poses a sort of a challenge. Okay? Because at one point in time, governments were afraid to make large commitments. Okay? Today, governments are willing to make very vast commitments without always being sort of prepared about how to implement that. And I think that somewhere along the line, we are going to have to balance the commitments that we make as a government, as societies, and what can be achieved within the time period in which it can be achieved. It's a good problem to have, okay? But it is a problem.
support the Nairobi statement of ICPD 25. That means accelerating the promise, as you know, and its global commitments. When coming here, we prepared different instruments we would like to commit, and hopefully they are as clear and as working as you just liked us to do. So we will continue our initiative on rights-based family planning and maternal health until 2023. That's our 100 million euros a year for bilateral projects. Some of them I just mentioned on the panel. In these connections, we are also planning to strengthen our support to our key partners, countries like Niger and Malawi and Cameroon, by another 20 million euros. And for the first time, we will also disperse, as part of a renewed initiative, increased core funding of 12 million euros to the International Planned Parenthood Federation. There are core contribution of UNFPA of 33 millions and contributing to the work of the Global Financing Facility with 50 millions. These are all numbers, and hopefully they will work. But last not least, I will take an idea of the colleague from Japan, because this afternoon we have been sitting together and learned from each other from different stages, from different point of view of countries dealing with population development. Elder ones, as Germany is without doubt, and younger ones, Bangladesh, India, and the African countries. And in this spirit of learning of each other, we would like to continue this dialogues, bringing partners together from Africa and other regions of the world. And we would like to, or we would offer to start an initiative at the next UN Commission on Population and Development in New York 2020 to bring all these people together and have a dialogue, learn from each other, and find a way to handle this problem for the future of our planet and of our youth. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we could have saved ourselves one person, because what I'm going to say is exactly what Professor Desai just said, which is balance the commitments with the achievements. A move from plan and more into action and to effective action. And I think I have three specific recommendations. One is, I think the extent to which we are going to be able to move to effective action is to sort of integrate the commitments that are part of the ICPD and integrate them with other regional and global and national commitments. How to integrate these commitments to the national planning agenda is going to be the first commitment. They cannot be separate. They have to somehow mesh with the two while maintaining the distinctive contribution of the ICPD agenda, which is basically highlight the importance of populations. It's not, if you think about any development indicator, you have some kind of welfare indicator in the numerator, and in the denominator you have population. It's not just about population size, it's about the different populations that we've been talking about here and their needs and how you can meet these needs and how you can harness the energy of these different populations. And so this is what we can contribute there. So the second recommendation has to do with synergies. The world cannot afford to work on individual goals one at a time. We have to find ways to catch multiple goals and achieve them with sort of broad-based policy that achieve win-win solutions. Okay, so invest in education as a means to empower people, as a means to reduce inequality, protect the environment, and so forth. So these synergies are important to be looking for. The third recommendation, and it's kind of a self-serving, is if we really want to be efficient, this is also a time to think about the investment that we make into science and policy. We cannot, without very solid evidence, very solid evaluation, monitoring mechanism, without a very strong conversation and interface between science and policy, we cannot be efficient. And so the governments in the world, the global community has to think about creating new interfaces that are going to foster a close and respectful dialogue between scientists and policymakers. And I hope the ambassador of Bulgaria is going to be, as an overall expert, is going to be part of these kind of platforms. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone here. So today we've learned that at every stage of aid structure and across geographies, to achieve sustainable, vibrant, and inclusive societies, we must assure that every individual is afforded the rights and equipped with the tools to harness their potential through skill, craft, and opportunity. We know that sustainability of successful efforts cannot be assessed only on a macro level, but in the daily lives of the people who power our globe. Opportunity is not always available equally, but with global partnership, supply and demand for skilled labor, we can achieve that harmony, especially if we leverage the unlimited potential of women and youth. Everyone benefits from a globally integrated workforce, and that can only happen if there are continued investments in integrated strategies, collaboration, cross-learning, and communication. So thank you again to all of our distinguished panelists for a truly insightful, inspiring, and very concrete discussion today. Thank you.